Hi, my name is Sage, and this week I want to make 2 cupcakes, but also I want to make them clay and spooky, so that's what I'm going to do this week. And to get started, I'm going to need some cupcake paper and some tin foil. Next, I'm going to take the tin foil and scrunch it up. I'm going to do that twice as I am making 2 cupcakes, and these are going to be the bases for them, but since I made them too tiny, I then go over them again. And in hindsight, I should have made them more of a mushroom shape, but in my mind when making these, I was only making the top part of the cupcake, but miraculously, everything actually worked out in the end and there was no mess ups. I just added more clay later. So yay! Spoiler! And speaking of more clay, bam! Clay! So now that those are covered in clay, I then move on to making a tinfoil base for the icing. So I scrunch up some tinfoil and you may be like, dude, what shape is that? That looks like a sad little hat right now. And you're right. So I add some more. And for this piece, I focus more on twirling it so it looks more like a cone shape. And now that I'm thinking that it looks good enough, I then make a second one. And bam, a second one appears. But as you can see, they are various sizes. So I fix the first one and match them to the size of the second one. So now they are semi the correct size. Better than before at least. I then, bam, cover them in clay. So now I can work on attaching the icing to the cupcake, and obviously I'm not happy with the first time I try to attach it, so second time's a charm. I then get more clay and kind of mold them together so that they stay. And here I'm pinching the clay away from the cupcake base, as this will be the future mouth of the scary cupcake. Next, I roll some more clay before attaching it to the icing because I'm building up the icing base. And I'm noticing, and you're probably noticing this too, the icing's a little long. Like, I don't need to do all that. And so it gotta go. And now I'm just kind of smoothing some stuff out and making it look like I didn't just take his head off. And here I roll another clay log and place it over the icing as I'm going for the swirly look. Then to attach it, I use the ball stylus and make some harsh grooves at the top and bottom of the log, while keeping the middle like a half moon shape. I also carve out the base of the icing just so it looks like it's sitting on top of the cupcake, before then smashing it in with my ball stylus to create texture. Next, I add another log and I continue the same method as before, using the ball stylus on the top and bottom, before then going back to the snipped icing because I'm thinking this would be perfect to use for a tongue. But since it's a little thick, as you can tell, I end up adding even more clay to it, but when I do that, I smush it down. So it's more like a tongue now. Next, I take my ball stylus and make the middle of the tongue protrude more so it looks more gross and scary. Next, I attach it to the cupcake itself, so now it really looks like he has a mouth. And here I place him in the cupcake tray, and he's looking like a cursed dessert of some kind, but now it's time to bring the cupcake to life. So I start to pinch the top of the cupcake to make the sides protrude outside from the base, before then using my ball stylus to help flatten and shape it. I also add more clay to the sides as well, before then getting completely distracted and adding even more clay to the icing because why not? So now that the cupcake looks like this, I then repeat all these steps on the second one. And bam, the second one appears. But since this cupcake's tongue ended up having more pizzazz than the first one, I'm putting a sphere on the end of it, as this will be an eyeball later because that's scary. And speaking of an eyeball, I couldn't just make one, so now I'm gonna make another 5. So I get some tin foil and make little spheres, and then bam, they are covered in clay. Next, since these cupcakes got mouths, I obviously gotta give them some teeth. So I take some small pieces of clay and roll and shape them into little cones, and then bam, I made way more than I needed. And now all the eyes and teeth can go into the oven, and while they bake, I'm gonna go back to the cupcakes. For this cupcake, I'm gonna add even more icing because I think that's fun, before then adding even more details to his tongue because I want it to look super gross. For the other cupcake, I add more icing to it as well, before then making its mouth bigger so I can fit even more teeth into it later on. But since the eyeball cupcake has, well, eyeballs, I needed to make something for this one too. And I thought it should be crunchy since I picture the eyeballs to be slimy. So I landed on the idea of making a bone. And so I take a little rectangular piece of clay and put 2 spheres on the end of it, but these spheres are nowhere near the same size. So I gotta try again. And when I do, honestly, they're not much better, but I think they're a little better, so I keep them. I decided with the power of my ball stylus, I'm gonna make this work. And somehow I did. I even shocked myself. Next, I cut the bone in half and used the ball stylus to blend it to the icing. And now I do the exact same thing on the other side. And here I thought I pressed record, but it turns out I just had the camera on. But I made some ridges in the bone cupcake, and now I'm gonna do that to the eyeball one. And to do that, I take the ball stylus and run it up and down the sides, and bam, now it has texture. And it's right in time for the teeth and eyeballs to have been baked and cooled down so I can add them. I start by adding some teeth to the eyeball cupcake, and since I have natural claws, I use them to smush the teeth into the gums. And with the power of editing, bam, the bone cupcake got teeth now too. And this is where I'm adding the eyeballs to the eyeball cupcake, and I just shove them into the icing. That's really about it. And so now that he has 6 eyeballs, both of the cupcakes are now done. So I put them in the oven, and bam, they are now ready to paint, and they're gonna be chocolate cupcakes. And you may be like, girl, chocolate cupcakes aren't blue. What is that? This is a product of me trying to make my own brown. I googled it and they said it was 1 part blue, 1 part yellow, and 1 part red, but I only had like a really dark blue, and I tried my best with mixing it, and it just kind of ended up like this. But I do have an umber brown that I don't need to mix that I will put up top of this color that I mixed. And the cupcakes are 2 very different colors. It's just I am not the best mixer. Next, I paint the eyeball cupcake, and I go for an orangey color, so I mixed orange and white together to get this color. I know it's kind of looking a little sandy right now. Also, the top eyeball fell off. That's my bad. I'll glue him on later. I then go a little ham with the orange on the other side, but it's okay because I'm gonna do 2 layers, so everything is gonna balance out. And then for the bone cupcake, I do my first layer in pink because I thought that would be a fun color for the icing. And suddenly they are both painted and ready for the second coat. And you know what that means? Bam! Second coat! The pink one doesn't look that much different, but that's okay. It's still a rad shade of pink. Next, I start with the eyeball cupcake and mix the white and orange together again, but this time more heavy on the white, and I cover the protruding edges of the icing before then going in with just the orange color for all the indents. And so now that the orange icing is now looking very shaded, I then do the exact same steps onto the bone cupcake. For the darker parts though, I mix some red together with the pink because red is just a darker pink, so it made sense in my brain. And speaking of red and pink, I then use that combo to paint the tongue. I do use more red than pink while mixing it though. And you probably guessed it, I repeat this on the bone cupcake as well. And now I get to paint the inside of the mouth, and I use a purple and red combo to make it look gnarly. It was super hard to get all the crevices though because the teeth were in the way the entire time. And if you can avoid adding the teeth before painting, I'd recommend it because this took me so long on both of the mouths. But once that was done, I got to start painting the eyeballs. My first one was rough. I mixed pink, yellow, and white and got this color. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't this. But then I end up using just the yellow paint to color in the rest of the eyeballs because I want them to look gnarly. And I end up going over the travesty that was the first one with just the yellow paint. Next, I use the red paint and dab it at the back of an eyeball before going in with a little bit of purple as well to again make it look gnarly. Then using the same brush, I dip that into some white paint and paint the top and the sides of the eyeball, but I leave a little bit of the yellow poking through. I then repeat these steps on all of the eyeballs, and bam, they're all looking pretty creepy. Next, I do a bit of touch-ups along the yellow and red lines to extend the dark colors because I just think that they look so cool. I love red and purple, they're just such a fun combo. Then while those are drying, I paint the bone on the bone cupcake white. And speaking of white, I then use white on the front of each of the eyeballs. I do keep it somewhat transparent though because I don't want it to overpower the creepiness. After that, I use the butt of a paintbrush and poke each of the eyeballs with a dot of black paint to mark out where I want the iris to go. Then I go in with a brush and make them bigger. So now that he can finally see, I then go in and start to paint the teeth. I use a yellow and white combo to paint each individual tooth before then going in with my red and purple combo at the root to give each of them some depth. And you probably guessed it, I do the exact same thing on the bone cupcake. His teeth ended up turning out a little bit more whiter, but it matches the bone in his head, so I think it worked out. And last but not least, I glue the rogue eyeball onto the eyeball cupcake. And now that he's adhered, everything is all done, and I would just like to say thank you so much for watching, and now it's time for the glamour shots.